engage these investors, these international investors, some of whom, sir, sorry, ma'am, some of whom were already holding some of government's existing Eurobond paper, which was due to mature finally in 2029, and some who never held any Barbadian paper. And we explained exactly where we found the economy in May of 2018, the reforms that we undertook, Madam Deputy Speaker, which has resulted in the credit quality as adjudged by the three rating agencies to be improving, and to the extent that the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, Madam Deputy Speaker, supported by the International Monetary Fund, supported by the multilateral development banks throughout these last 7 years, has meant that we have been able to meet all of our structural benchmarks under the programs, both programs, which allows any investor, domestic or external investor, to be able to see that the government has been true to the program and that people can take the government at its word with respect to its ability to implement not just the reforms, but to be faithful with respect to restoring public trust in relation to the management of the fiscal affairs of this country. During those discussions, we got extremely good feedback from those investors. Now, as you would appreciate, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have been toiling to ensure that this economy can recover and work for ordinary Barbadians. And therefore, we embarked on that roadshow to be able to tell our story. During that time, we recognized as well that there certainly was some volatility with respect to the markets, and clearly, whilst interest rates have changed significantly from the low interest rate environment when we took office a few years ago, we recognize that our story, the Barbados story, given what we have been able to achieve, in spite of all of the challenges, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the Barbados Reform Program is a program that every Barbadian can be proud of, and it is a program, Madam Deputy Speaker, that investors are interested in hearing and are equally interested in being able to help support the financing options for Barbados. Now, we have, I say we meaning the government of Barbados, the last time that we embarked on an issuance of this nature was in 2010, Madam Deputy Speaker, when we went in the market, we borrowed $200 million at that time, Madam Deputy Speaker, and that was over a 12-year duration. And I must say that was very different conditions than exist today, and that was well before, as you and the rest of the country became accustomed to. That was before the myriad of downgrades that occasioned this country, as well as the increase in taxation, relatively speaking, that accompanied the increased costs of debt service, the increased costs with respect to interest payments as a result of the deterioration in the credit quality occasioned by those downgrades. And therefore, we told Barbados' story of the last 7 years, and notwithstanding the fact that we had initially embarked on a non-deal roadshow, which meant that we were simply sensitizing the market as to what was happening in Barbados, what the future plans with respect to the government of Barbados, with respect to know that we've come to the end formally of this second program supported by the International Monetary Fund, what the government was intending to be able to do going forward. And so, subsequent to that, at the conclusion of that roadshow, and we met some 53 sets of investors, some of the largest hedge funds in the world, some of the largest pension funds in the world, Madam Deputy Speaker. And at the conclusion of that roadshow, we felt that the conditions were sufficiently amenable for us to be able to achieve what we potentially wanted to achieve should we seek to execute this program. As it relates to the liability management, as I said, all we are doing here, Madam Deputy Speaker, is swapping debt and to be able to extend the maturities of some of the debt and to prepare some of the IMF debt, which, as you know, Madam Deputy Speaker, 7 years into the life of this administration, we engaged the International Monetary Fund as early as June of 2018, and therefore, once we reached staff level agreement shortly after that, the formal program started in October of 2018. And so 7 years now has pretty much passed, and therefore, as you would recognize, some of that IMF debt now has to start to be repaid, because the IMF, being the lender of last resort, typically gives lending over that 7-year period in order to make sure then that countries are not dependent on IMF support. And therefore, as we approach this particular juncture, we felt it was important that given that the interest rates have changed significantly over these last 7 years, we felt it was important to be able to ensure that we are able to better manage the flow of debt service, and therefore we've come here to this Parliament to be able to conclude this transaction that helps us to be able to repay initially some 340-odd million in relation to the Eurobond, Madam Deputy Speaker, US dollars, as well as approximately $142 million prepayment with respect to the IMF debt that is going to be scheduled to be paid between the end of this year as well as the end of 2026. And so we are here to be able to do that, which in of itself, Madam Deputy Speaker, creates fiscal space, because it means that the gross financing for government over the next year, 18 months to 2 years, will be less in relation to how we are able to execute our fiscal program. It also means, Madam Deputy Speaker, that rather than having to find resources to do that, it means then that we can focus a little more in relation to being able to drive more capital and to be able to do more for Barbadians. And therefore, notwithstanding the fact that the timing with respect to where the world seems to be going, I fundamentally believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, that giving ourselves the most flexible type of arrangements, given where the world seems to be going, is the right thing for Barbados at this time, and therefore this liability management operation, I believe, is most fundamentally important for the future of Barbados. I should also add, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the IMF board originally was supposed to meet on June 26th, but they actually met last week, Madam Deputy Speaker, and considered Barbados' final review, and again issued, for the benefit of the entire world, confirmation that Barbados had indeed successfully concluded all of the arrangements under the second fund program, and therefore the timing with respect to the execution of this transaction could not have been better from the perspective of being able to signal to the market that Barbados had not just turned around its fortunes, but that any investor, locally, regionally, or internationally, Madam Deputy Speaker, can trust the government of Barbados when it comes to the management of the fiscal affairs of this country, but equally, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the course that we have set for Barbados, for this economy, is a sound course, and that people, Madam Deputy Speaker, no matter where you are in the world, can believe in the government and the people of Barbados on this particular journey. And therefore, notwithstanding some of the commentary that I saw locally, and admittedly, Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that there are some for whom the last 7 years is not kind because it demonstrates what competence looks like politically, what competence looks like from a governance perspective, what competence looks like from a professional perspective, and therefore there are some who will harken back to a time when the debt to GDP was indeed almost 180%. But debt to GDP today is just about 102%, as I indicated earlier this year. We are going on a downward trajectory, and by the end of this year, we should be less than 100%. Less than 100%. But the work is not yet done. And as I said earlier, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are smoothing out the debt service profile in order to ensure that we can focus more on the things that matter most to Barbadians. And so we will continue to pay our debts. The ratings agencies have all acknowledged the progress that we have made as a government and as a country, and therefore, as we seek to execute these transactions, as you know, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have done a couple of debt swaps already, but those debt swaps were occasioned by guarantees by the multilateral development banks. This is Barbados going into the market and saying to the market, this is our story. We have been able to restore the macroeconomic fundamentals in this country, and people in Barbados are seeing the benefits of that restoration of macroeconomic confidence, and therefore, as investors, you too can be confident in being able to invest in Barbados. And therefore, that has been part of what we've been able to achieve, and therefore, whilst there were questions about whether or not the government will be able to raise money, I can say to this chamber and to the country, Madam Deputy Speaker, that whilst we put out a tender notice on the date that escapes me is 2 Fridays ago, Madam Deputy Speaker, a tender notice. We put out the tender notice after the escalation of things in the Middle East, Madam Deputy Speaker, for $500 million US, Madam Deputy Speaker, as the resolution says. And because we were able to communicate effectively, Madam Deputy Speaker, with investors, by the end of Friday last week, we had received firm orders, Madam Deputy Speaker, of $2.8 billion US in orders from investors all over the world, Madam Deputy Speaker, who are prepared, Madam Deputy Speaker, to put their monies in Barbados. As a matter of fact, I remember one particular meeting, you recall, Prime Minister, we were in a meeting and one of the investors said, quite frankly, they could not get their hands on Barbados bonds, and referred to the fact that we were running primary surpluses as a fat, juicy surplus. In all my years as an economist, I've never heard anybody refer to a primary surplus as fat and juicy. And the reason that they refer to that is because it was the discipline of achieving those surpluses that is part of the success story of us being able to bring our debt down. But it is not just the surplus, but we've been able to ensure that growth in the economy supports our capability of running those surpluses. Inclusive growth, to be able to achieve those surpluses. So this has not been a story of austerity, as the leader of the opposition might want others to believe, because this Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, Madam Deputy Speaker, has been one where we have gone the length and breadth of Barbados to ensure that the most vulnerable people in this country, in the worst set of circumstances to afflict this country, that we were able to keep people's heads above water, that we've been able to bring a number of critical reforms along. You heard the Prime Minister in the debate earlier today speak to the fact that we had to introduce a minimum wage. We increased the non-contributing pensions for pensioners. We've increased welfare for citizens in this country to respond to the needs of the most vulnerable. And in addition to that, we've also been able to increase salaries for public servants, but equally, private sector salaries have also increased in the country to keep pace with the fact that this has happened in the last 7 years. And this has nothing to do with the fact that we had COVID, we had the hurricanes, we had the ash, all of these things. And war, 2 wars, 2 wars. And there's 3, one in George Street, one in George Street, but nevertheless. All of these things, seriously, Madam Deputy Speaker, all of these things. And the Barbados economy has been able to rebound strongly, and our ability to ensure that citizens, ordinary people, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we can keep the incidence of tax where it is, and to continue to service, improve the delivery of public goods and public services in this country, Madam Deputy Speaker, is important. And therefore, we are not going to stand here and rest on our laurels, because we know that there's still some things that need to be improved. But the reality of it is that these last 7 years, Barbados has done very well. There's still more work to be done, but we know that the best thing that we can do is to ensure that we have enough buffer to be able to respond to any eventuality. And this liability management operation today, Madam Deputy Speaker, is an important tool that allows the government to be able to achieve this. Now, what does this mean with respect to the fiscal situation over the next few years? Basically, it means that we will free up about $372 million for the remainder of 2025 and through the calendar year of 2026. And this is important because this, as I said earlier, reduces the financing needs of government over the next 18 months or so, and allows us then to be able to extend those maturities out, and allows us then to be able to do things in the interim that makes more sense for ordinary citizens. As I indicated earlier, Madam Deputy Speaker, the last time we went into the market in this way was 2010, when we issued that $200 million loan in the market. Barbadians may remember there was a Credit Suisse loan in 2013. That was not a market issuance. It was a syndicated facility that was facilitated by Credit Suisse, which is a different type of arrangement, but the reality is that this is genuine participation by a range of investors. More than 90 investors now hold this new instrument across the board, and therefore demonstrates a wide cross-section of confidence that investors now have in the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program. And I say to Barbadians that as our credit quality improves, it means that the credit conditions in the market will only get better. Now, of course, that is still subject to the fact that international markets interest rates have changed significantly, and therefore we need to redouble our efforts to be able to improve our credit quality as quickly as possible. But that depends on us being able to get up every day and go to work, whether you're in the public sector or in the private sector, and make sure that you can execute, Madam Deputy Speaker, to be able to drive the growth even harder. And driving the growth harder is going to mean less interest costs for government, it's going to mean less interest costs for the businesses, and it will mean less interest costs for individuals, Madam Deputy Speaker. And therefore, as we continue to be able to execute on these macro reforms, I want Barbadians to appreciate and understand that it has a direct impact on anything that you may do. Whether you get your mortgage, Madam Deputy Speaker, whether you get your loan for a car, or even household appliances, or whether all of these things matter, Madam Deputy Speaker, with respect to how ordinary Bajans are able to live their lives. And therefore, we do not do these things in isolation. So when when others speak, we need to ensure that we communicate that this macroeconomic recovery is in the interest of ordinary Barbadians. And therefore, we will continue to work with all stakeholders to ensure that as the fiscal situation improves, as the country's situation improves, that certainly access to financing and cheaper credit allows Barbadians, Madam Deputy Speaker, to be able to, in effect, Madam Deputy Speaker, build their dreams, achieve their dreams. Because at the end of the day, without access to financing that is affordable, then it means that persons will not be able to do the things that they will ordinarily be able to do. And therefore, this is part of what we are intending to ensure that the government always has the capacity to respond. Let me also indicate, Madam Deputy Speaker, that these bonds, notwithstanding the fact that when we had the debt restructuring, all of our debt had included, at that point, the natural disaster clauses. And as you know, the natural disaster clauses allows the government to defer debt up to a 2-year period to respond to any natural disaster that may occasion the country of a sufficient nature that allows us to be able to rebuild. This new instrument is the first instrument to be launched in the international capital market in its own right, without any guarantees or anything from multilateral development banks, that has embedded in them the natural disaster clauses as well as the pandemic clauses. And as the Honourable Prime Minister has been leading the charge with respect to the Bridgetown Initiative as to why these clauses are important, especially for small states. It is important for Barbados to understand that a lot of the advocacy that we have put into the international market, Barbados is now leading the space with respect to being the first issuer in the commercial credit space, globally, to be able to have bonds in these clauses included in the bonds, to be able to ensure that the creditors have certainty in the event that something happens in Barbados. And if it does happen, then there's an orderly approach with respect to being able to work out the debt. But what's important, that natural disaster clauses as well as the pandemic clauses are included, and therefore the government of Barbados, should any of these things occur in the future, would have the ability on these commercial terms to be able to suspend the debt, deal with the issues that you have to deal with in the interim, and the creditors now understand that. And the reason that this is important is because as a small country, Madam Deputy Speaker, and we've seen it happen across the region in recent years. A number of countries have been hit by natural disasters. They've been trying to recover and had to borrow to recover, to build from those natural disasters, Madam Deputy Speaker. And whilst they're rebuilding, another hurricane comes along and lick them up again, Madam Deputy Speaker. And then you have to borrow again. And therefore, this is fundamentally important, and we hope that the rest of the region, as well as those across the Pacific and others who are in a similar, in the Indian Ocean, who are similarly as vulnerable as we are, will also find favor with respect to the market in being able to issue these debt clauses, because it gives certainty to the creditor, but it gives the opportunity for the borrower to be able to focus, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the things that really matter to the people in the immediate aftermath of a disaster, because as you would appreciate on a small country, Madam, as a small island, that stability and security in post-disaster is important, but the ability to respond and to rebuild quickly is fundamentally important. And therefore, these clauses have been included, and the reality is that this has been, I think, as a result of us being able to explain very clearly to the creditors what that will mean for them in relation to being able to see that they will get their monies, but that they will do so after the country is able to respond. This new debt, Madam Deputy Speaker, $500 million US, interest rate of 8%. There's a 5-year grace period, and then followed by 10 equal semi-annual payments of the principal. And the final maturity is the 26th of June, 2035, Madam Deputy Speaker, and therefore it is important that the public understands that. Now, the existing debt, and let me indicate, the existing debt that we had before was 6.5%, Madam Deputy Speaker. But the higher interest rates are for a couple of things. One, the maturity is 5.5 years longer in weighted average terms. So, as I was indicating, the existing bonds were due to mature in 2029, Madam Deputy Speaker. We have now extended the terms to 2035. And therefore, as a result of that, we have a slightly higher interest because of the rollover of the existing debt from the holders. And therefore, the longer weighted average terms is as a result of that, but equally, because the underlying US Treasury interest rates have gone up, upon which everything in the world, as you know, we transitioned from LIBOR to SOFR, and that is influenced by US Treasuries. That interest rate has risen over the course of the last few years, and therefore the two things have combined for us to be able to get to the 8% interest rate that is here. And we hope that certainly that there would be better terms with respect to the market. But as you know, in the post-COVID environment, we've seen the Fed in the United States, as well as the European Central Bank, in order to be able to drive inflation down in the post-pandemic era, interest rates have risen, and as a result of that monetary policy being executed both in the United States as well as Europe, as well as the Bank of England, we've seen interest rates rise. Now, we've seen some reduction recently, but of course, with respect to the wars starting, as well as some of the volatility in the Middle East, we would hope that interest rates will come down a little further, but that remains to be seen, Madam Deputy Speaker, and therefore we felt it was important that the timing of the execution of this transaction, that given where we were seeing the near term, that there really was not going to be a better time to get into the market and get out, given all that was happening globally. And therefore, the partial prepayment of the IMF also achieves a couple of things, Madam Deputy Speaker. One, we will prepay the principal, as I indicated, between next month and 2027. That also means that early prepayment would mean that, because we currently have about 505% of our quota, and therefore that prepayment will reduce us to just under 400%, 395 precisely, which in the event that something extraordinary happens in the near term, that will give us some space that should, and I say it to Barbadians, because as we've seen over the course of the last few weeks, whether it is the Middle East, and certainly with the United States deciding to support, to support Israel against Iran, and now there's a ceasefire and all of these types of things. The reality is the world has become a much more volatile place. And therefore, in the event that, and I know it's something that we will discuss with the social partnership soon, is that now that we've come to the end of this IMF program, in the event that we may at some point in the future have to go back to the IMF, not because of anything that's happening in Barbados, but purely because of things that may be happening outside of Barbados. That in the event that this would allow us to be able to have additional resources available, so prepaying now helps us to be able to have more access to resources, emergency resources, in the event either of a natural disaster or any other issue that may arise. And so, but in addition to that, it means that by prepaying, it means that the surcharges that are usually accompanied by the surcharges charged by the IMF, that we will be able to avoid those, and therefore it means that we are able to to benefit from being able to prepare early. And therefore, again, Madam Deputy Speaker, it means that that is monies that Barbadians don't have to look for to repay the IMF. So there's good reason here to be able to do this liability management transaction and to be able to exercise what I believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, is prudent debt management, prudent fiscal management, but more importantly, ensure that we can respond to the people of Barbados if and when we need to, especially given that we've seen an escalation in commodity prices to some degree, as well as continued pressures with respect to inflation. And so we have been able to get to this point because we have been diligent with respect to the work that we've done over these last 7 years, Madam Deputy Speaker. I wish the market was in a better condition than it is today, but at the end of it, the government still has to be able to manage the fiscal affairs. There will be other opportunities because we are working currently on another debt swap, and we're going to be focused more on how we divert some of those resources to address some of the social investment in health and education, Madam Deputy Speaker. And therefore, I think by now Barbadians will come to the realization that the government is utilizing every tool it has in its arsenal to be able to bring financial relief, but focusing on the interventions that help us to be able to unlock additional investment to improve, as I said, Madam Deputy Speaker, the public goods and delivery of public goods and public services in this country. And so, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a good day for this country. And whilst, as I said earlier, we do not rest on our laurels, the reality of where the world seems to be going, Barbados must find itself in a position always, Madam Deputy Speaker, to have some level of flexibility. I cannot tell you, and certainly Leader of the Opposition cannot tell you where he will be in the next 18 months or where I will be in the next 18 months. But the reality is that we are ensuring that Barbados has the capability, especially in terms of what we are seeing globally, to always be in a position to respond to any eventuality. And we have built enough buffers because we found when we came to office, we had 3.5, nearly 4 weeks of reserves. We now have 7 months, Madam Deputy Speaker, of international reserves. And that is not to boast by any stretch of the imagination, but that is to ensure that, one, the defense of the peg is solid. We have the capability to be able to respond to the private sector should they need it in order to ensure that we can drive growth, and therefore that is why we have spent the time being able to ensure that the buildup in reserves, which is driven largely in part by the strong tourism performance, that continues to be so, and we are monitoring very carefully the source markets to ensure that that continues over the near term. In addition to that, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I said earlier, the fiscal program in terms of the primary surpluses continue. We've reformed our corporate tax regime. We have prepayments in place, and we have also restarted the domestic market. And I want to take the time just very quickly right now, Madam Deputy Speaker, to say to Barbadians, especially those persons who have foreign exchange accounts in our local banking system. We have collectively $1.6 billion in individual accounts in our banking system right now, not earning a single cent of interest. The government, as part of us being able to resuscitate the domestic market, we have issued a US dollar denominated bond, just 18 months, 3%, to allow persons, just as we've done here internationally, to allow persons who have monies in their bank account, in their US dollar accounts, to be able to get some interest, participate in helping to shape the financing of government and the building out of this economy. And therefore, I urge Barbadians, if you are, you don't have to take my word, take the word of the IMF, take the word of these investors who have lined up to put $2.8 billion behind the government of Barbados, and we said we only want $500 million. And therefore, look at the performance of the Barbados economy, and you can determine for yourself whether or not you believe that the bond that we've put out is something that will be of interest to you. And I know that if you do so, you will also participate as well. We have also reissued in the market another BOSS bond, $200 million. I signed the order last week for it. The BOSS bond is a 5-year bond. This is now in Barbados dollars, Madam Deputy Speaker. 4.5% over 5 years. Madam Deputy Speaker, we've gone through the mathematics. Every single bond, savings bond that we have issued, we've ensured that we've been able to repay Barbadians, and they were not subject to restructuring. I'm not going to go through that sordid detail of what the last government did, but this government has held faith with that. And so as we have restarted the domestic capital market, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are absolutely confident that Barbadians can also contribute to the financing and build-out of the recovery of Barbados, and that as we move forward, that not just will you get a better return, but you can be assured that with the improvement of the government's credit quality, that you can feel more confident that with every $100 that you put in a bond or a treasury bill or anything of that nature, that you are assured that you will get that monies back, those monies back, Madam Deputy Speaker, at the assigned time. And therefore, this is us setting up the economy to have Barbadians included in the recovery, Madam Deputy Speaker, because there are not a lot of options out there right now, and it's something that we want to give Barbadians the assurance that this performance on the efforts that we've all undertaken over the last 7 years, that there will now be some financial benefit, some financial return to Barbadians that they can hold on to. And therefore, it is important, as I've had to remind some persons in the market, that when we first came to office, the Treasury bill rate was 7.25%, Madam Deputy Speaker, for 90 days. Today, not today, but a few weeks ago, the last auction that we put into the market, the Treasury bill rate was 1.69%, Madam Deputy Speaker. And therefore, the credit quality matters. And therefore, whilst you're not paying as much interest as you were under the last government, because they had to tax people over and over and over and over in order to help repay the debt, we've stabilized the debt situation in the country. And whilst I can't promise you that you can get 7.5% from the government for a 90-day Treasury bill, I can assure you that as we rebuild the yield curve and give options for how long you want to give the money to the government to, that you will get a reasonable rate of return that is respectable, and you don't feel as if you are lending to the government like it is a payday loan or there's some type of loan short arrangement in place. This is a responsible government responding to the needs of Barbadians, and therefore this liability management operation that Parliament is being asked to approve is to afford the government the space to be able to reduce its overall financing needs over the near term, reduce the propensity for any need for taxation. As I said earlier, Madam Deputy Speaker, you can never be sure that there will never be any tax increases in the future, but this gives us the benefit to know that over the near term, any issues related to that will be alleviated. But more importantly, the financing that we will now raise will be now focused more on us being able to drive more interventions in the domestic space, to be able to finance more capital projects, to be able to help chart a stronger recovery, Madam Deputy Speaker, over the near term. And so this is important. let me end on on this point, Madam Deputy Speaker. In all of our lives, we have to make financial decisions. And therefore, all of us have some type of debt, Madam Deputy Speaker. And if you are not actively looking at how do you create your own space, whether it's in your mortgage, whether it's in your car loans, there are times when you will see in the papers every now and then, some of the financial institutions will tell you, I will pay the legal fees. If you come and bring your mortgage with me, you get a different rate. Yep. And I'm saying to Barbadians, you have to utilize all of the financial instruments. And yes, it takes time. And sometimes the process may not be as smooth as we would like. But if we do not, in our personal lives, utilize the same type of facilities and innovation that the government is utilizing to make life a little easier for you, then it means that we would have failed in not being able to educate people, Madam Deputy Speaker, that they too can go to any financial institution and ask for a debt consolidation to be able to help ease their own debt service when the month comes. And therefore, once you are disciplined with respect to what you have to pay, then it means that you can have an easier path with respect to you being able to service your own debt and eventually being able to do more. And therefore, in the same way that we have had to make decisions in government upfront in 2018 to be able to address the mess that we inherited, we are in this position today because we have been disciplined, we've been prudent, Madam Deputy Speaker, and we have been utilizing all of the financial tools available to us to date to be able to not just execute this particular transaction, but I urge Barbadians, review your own financial circumstance and be open and honest with your financiers about what it is we can afford. And once we can agree on a particular plan, stick to that plan. In the same way that the Barbados Labour Party, we have stuck to the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, which all of us in this chamber, including the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, signed in 2018. And therefore, having stuck to the plan, we are confident that not just transactions like these, but other transactions that will come in the future will bring benefits to Barbadians directly or indirectly, but it allows government to be able to ensure that in uncertain times like these, that we are still able to provide some relative certainty with respect to the management of the fiscal affairs of this country. And so, Madam Deputy Speaker, I am proud to be able to say that I support certainly this resolution. I am pleased that the international investors have demonstrated their confidence in us by tendering more than 5.5 times what we were asking for, and to be able to allow us to come in effect, at the same level as those in the region who have a credit rating one notch above us. And therefore, it is important to appreciate that the good work that this government has done on behalf of the people of Barbados, it is being recognized outside, and I hope that the Leader of the Opposition and those domestically will recognize that good work has been done, and therefore let us decide how we are going to ensure that this economic recovery takes greater root and that people can participate in that recovery. And I urge Barbadians, the government is making available options for people to invest in. We are not promising anybody any quick returns. You have to set those thoughts aside and focus on what is discipline. And it is the discipline of being able to set aside a little piece, Madam Deputy Speaker, as my grandmother taught me, and I'm sure as your grandmother taught you too, Madam Deputy Speaker, that you save up a little bit and you do what you have to do. And therefore, the government of Barbados has taken a disciplined approach with respect to how it manages its affairs. We will go to the markets as we need to go to the markets, whether domestically, regionally, or internationally. And at all times, we are doing so mindful that the benefits that we want to carve out for average Barbadians is such that we, one, no longer have to focus on the high tax burden that existed before, and that we're able to manage that and maintain that, Madam Deputy Speaker, but we have to do so by managing debt, driving growth, ensuring that there's greater employment and opportunities within the economy, and that everybody is contributing a little piece of the tax burden, Madam Deputy Speaker, and therefore if everybody's putting a little something in the pot, it makes it easier for everybody to be able to have the benefits that will accrue thereafter. And therefore, this resolution this evening is important because it signals that we are confident in our ability to go into the market, make our case as to why we believe that Barbados is a good investment, and I hope that Barbadians will as they already have with respect to the Treasury bills, because they're mostly oversubscribed at the moment, but more Barbadians will participate and allow us to be able to have a truly inclusive and resilient growth trajectory. And with those few words, Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution do not pass. Thank you.
The question is that this resolution do not pass? Oh, I beg your pardon. Beg your pardon, sir. I apologize. Honourable Member for St. Christchurch South and Leader of the Opposition. Beg your pardon.
I'm obliged to you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let me begin by saying that the government continues to embarrass the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, even if he means well, and even with his expertise in the area of economics, he is forced to come here quite often as junior minister in the Ministry of Finance to say things about the Barbadian economy that the Barbadian citizen here may not be experiencing. I took some notes while he was giving his synopsis of this economy. And I think the first note I took was when the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central said, and I quote, "Significant turnaround has been made in the fortunes of the Barbadian economy." Now, I think he's speaking more as a politician than as the good economist that we know him to be. But it must be a matter of some regret when good economists become politicians. And we preferred his more technocratic days. And I recorded as well in his synopsis, and I quote, "How are we able to achieve robust growth?" So the Honourable Member speaks first of the fortunes of the Barbadian economy. Now, mind you, this government comes here today, let the people of Barbados understand this, that this government comes here today to borrow $500 million US dollars, 1 billion Barbados dollars, to repay a debt to the IMF. Let the people of Barbados understand that. Let us simplify the discussion. Amidst the political discourse, let the people of Barbados understand that this is to strip it of all complexity, all political complexity. This parliament comes here today, this government comes here today to have this parliament approve a loan in the sum of $500 million US dollars to repay another loan. Let the people of Barbados understand that, so that all this talk about a significant turnaround in the fortunes of the Barbadian economy must now be discredited. And then the Honourable Member, well-meaning as he is, as an economist, speaks politically and asks the question, how have we been able to achieve this robust growth? We heard in here this morning a contest with a businessman who, unhappily for this country, and I'm very unhappy about what I saw in the paper, who unhappily promises, and the more appropriate word is threatens to increase food prices. And this is an assault on the poor. This is unlikely to be happening in a recovering economy where there has been robust growth. While the statistics are marvelous, the people are suffering. And a few years ago, we would have said the poor people are suffering. But it is not only the poor now. The middle class in Barbados, they're suffering too. And that's why I say that this government is unfair to the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central when it sends him here to tell people what is contrary to their lived experience. They know that they're not living in an economy of great fortune. They know that they're not living in an economy of robust growth. They do not believe, in spite of what the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central says, that there's 6.3 is the figure, I don't remember. Didn't hear everything, lowered his voice at critical points, that there's 6.3% unemployment, which he says is at its lowest ever. Now, you have the freedom of speech in here. We have the freedom of speech in here. But that freedom must come with a sense of responsibility. And what the Honourable Member says today is not meeting the lived reality in this economy of struggle, this economy of suffering, this economy that is manifesting the suffering of this country in the breakdown, the social breakdown that we have never experienced before. That is unprecedented, not this 6% unemployment. I don't know who is being counted among the employed, but the average Barbadian will not ever believe that there's 6% unemployment in this country. So it is a synopsis with which we take issue. But after that, we hear about 7 years. Now, the significance of that number 7 in the Bible in relation to a society's material progress is in the book of Genesis. And it is where the people prepare themselves during 7 years of plenty for 7 years of famine. Now, listening to the Honourable Member on every occasion that the Honourable Member speaks, he seems to characterize this 7 as the 7 of famine, because he's always promising someday something great is going to happen in this economy. Someday something good is going to happen. And indeed, he says this is a good day for Barbados. At the end of 7 years, something will happen. And we take it that the Honourable Member is saying to the country that we are on the threshold of 7 years of plenty. But as I've indicated to the Honourable Member, the biblical account is rather different. We experience the 7 years of plenty, and then we go to the 7 years of famine and prepare ourselves for that. But he has reversed that. He has reversed that, and he has said that we have experienced famine. He said that we have inherited. I am going to speak in silence. He has said.
I'm listening to you, sir. I'm listening to you.
You're listening to me.
Oh, yes, indeed. I'm hearing everyone.
You're also listening to the Honourable Member for St. Joseph?
I always hear everyone. I pay attention and respect to all of you. I'm listening to you.
Because I have a witness statement if you want me to read it. You want me to read it? If you want to take me on, look, it's in the registry. I know it is there. I know it is there, but you want me to read it? You sure? If I read that, you're not coming back in here, you know.
Honourable member, please. Continue on the resolution.
You're not coming back in here if I read that.
Order, please.
You're not coming back.
Order, please. Honourable member.
Look. It was filed on the 8th of August 2014. And the things that the Honourable member said in that witness statement, they are? Well, you're really not intending to come back here next time?
Sir, can we continue with this resolution, please?
I have your WhatsApp number. You want me to WhatsApp it to you?
Sir, do not speak to him across the chair, the chamber. Please continue.
Please control him. Please control him.
Honourable members, please. Honourable member, please continue.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for asking him to keep quiet. I don't know why he's all of a sudden so agitated.
Perhaps
What's wrong with him?
because you're waiting longer today than before. So please continue. Please continue. Do not mind their side, sir. I'm not hearing them. The public is listening to you.
If you're not hearing it, how you know their sides, ma'am?
Because you keep talking over and I can hear you. But I'm hearing you and paying concentration.
But we are back
Attention.
to the synopsis.
Yes, sir.
Yes, that is where you want me to locate my discourse.
Sure, yes, sir.
Not to be interrupted by noise. And so we heard a synopsis that does not meet the lived reality of Barbadians. And that synopsis ended with the disclosure that that is to say the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, took a joyful ride on a road show. Now, the Honourable Member for St. Peter cannot conceal his amusement nor laughter because, like you, ma'am, he associates the term road show with Barnum and Bailey and the Ringling Brothers. That's a circus. And so, the Honourable Member, is the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest present? Yes, he is. Please do not allow me to be set up by asides. Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest. So that the Honourable Member for St. Michael for Christchurch East Central said that he went on this road show and that he discloses to Barbadians that they were offered $2 billion plus US dollars, but they only took 500 million US dollars. And he's boasting that they had the chance to further hang this country, to indebt this country further. He said to this parliament that those investors describe this country as fat and juicy, like a mango ready to be plucked. And that is what this government is coming to the people of Barbados with, that we are a fat and juicy fruit ready to be plucked. But it is not the kind of investment that Barbadians want in this economy. Barbadians want the kind of investment into this economy that provides jobs and employment that would genuinely take the unemployment figures to 6%. It is nothing to boast about. when you come to a country and say, we are so fat and juicy that the people want us further indebted. That is nothing to boast about. And I will tell you, Your Honor, why it is nothing to boast about. Now, I've said that the people in Barbados need to understand that this government is borrowing money to repay a loan. It is not borrowing money to bring here to invest in anything. It's borrowing to repay the IMF. Let the people of Barbados understand the history of the relationship of this Barbados government with the IMF. I won't be long on this. In October 1982, the Barbados government entered an arrangement with the IMF and borrowed some 31 million US dollars, a lot of money at the time. Just about 18 months later, that arrangement was completed and the Barbados government completely exited the arrangement with the IMF. In other words, it was repaid. In February 1992, under the stewardship of the Right Honourable Prime Minister at the time, the government entered an arrangement with the IMF, and just about a year later, exited that arrangement. How, ma'am? By repaying the loan. Both loans were repaid. Indeed, in relation to one of those loans, there was a surplus to the benefit of the Barbados government. No monies on either occasion were borrowed to repay the IMF. So I don't know what we are coming in here today boasting about, that we are fat and juicy as a country, and that we had offers of 2.3 billion US dollars and we only took 500 million. You in debt in this country, you government, that's what I mean, you government, you are in debt in this country further to repay a loan when the history of loan repayment is that those governments at the time did not borrow to repay, but they did it differently. And you know how, ma'am. Let the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, with his knowledge as an economist, tell the people in his reply how those monies were repaid to the IMF. First, in 1984, and secondly, in 1993. But we are now repaying debt with loans. That is the state of Barbados. And the fact that we are caught in that situation is evidence that this economy is not performing. This economy is underperforming to the extent where it must borrow to repay. That is where we are. I will speak, Your Honor. They all have a chance to speak if you allow them. You may not like the content of what they say, but somebody has to speak the truth in here. But what is worse, ma'am? What is worse, and I'm going to be brief, because this is a tale of woe that does not require any lengthy discourse. Government, oh, by the way, when they went on the road tour, and we have already indicated that a road tour is language associated with a circus. But I'm not going to call it a circus. There were very honorable and distinguished persons on that road tour. Not least was White Oak. You could imagine, Your Honor, that in 2025, this government is still traveling about with White Oak. What was White Oak's fee, please? What is White Oak's fee, please? They got 27 million US a few years ago to do a job that the Honourable former representative of St. Peter said he could have done for free. The Honourable member for Christchurch Central could have done it too. Who is this White Oak? How much money they get for this one now? How much money are they getting for this one? They're doing it for free? Tell the people of Barbados. How much is White Oak's fee? What I can tell you about White Oak's intervention into the Barbadian economy is that White Oak gave advice that deprived the NIS fund in this country of $1.3 billion. And we have now to retire people at 67. And the NIS fund is in peril in a country that is aging. In a country in which our most aspirational young people are emigrating and leaving behind those who are not employed. And they're certainly among the 6% of the unemployed, and we say it is higher than 6%. But White Oak is still on this landscape. White Oak is still on this landscape. White Oak must be taken now to have derived a very handsome fee from having been on that roadshow. And at some point, I notice you're taking very good notes, Your Honor. I am obliged. White Oak, in relation to White Oak, the people of Barbados will soon be told by this open and transparent government how much is White Oak being paid for this transaction. I don't think it is another 27 million that they were paid a few years ago. I don't think that it will be exceeding the fee that was paid for the rescheduling of Greece's debt. And Greece has an economy that is far bigger than the Barbadian economy. And as I said then, the Financial Times complained about the excessive fee paid to White Oak. I can't hear them now. I can't hear them now. I can't hear them now. At some point, the people of Barbados will be told how much White Oak has derived from this. These are the hidden aspects of these transactions borne by the people of Barbados. Nothing to come in here and boast about these shiny transactions. And when you go behind the shiny surface of these transactions, somebody is benefiting, and this country is suffering. And we are supposed to come in here as an opposition and agree with everything. And agree with everything. Why that gentleman does just keep his mouth quiet there? Why is he trying to set me up?
We are listening to you. I am listening.
Why is he trying to set me up for distraction?
But you should not be easily distracted like that.
Yeah, but
Please
he's trying to set me up.
Keep your focus, sir, so that we can get through with the business.
Please stop trying to set me up. While I look at the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest, I want him to stop trying to set me up for distraction. You. He's trying to set me up for distraction. For as long as he comes in here, he's going to hear me talk about that. For as long as he comes in here, whenever he interrupts me, you know, he is the Honourable Member. His ministry deals with the Met Office. And the Met Office deals with rain and setting up of rain and that kind of thing. And I'm weary of that. I will hear him on how the rain is setting up. That is all I would hear him on in relation to setting up. Let me get back to the point, man.
Sir.
Tell him keep quiet. Tell him to stop interrupting me.
Please get back to the basics.
Now, the people of Barbados will be told that government is refinancing lower cost debt with higher cost debt. In other words, this loan, according to this document, let me go to the schedule, because you see, I will not say that this government lies to the people of Barbados,
I won't allow that.
but I don't even have to go to the document. Look, Your Honor, the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central said today that this new loan is transacted at 8%. That is what he said. I am sure, though, I got a document yesterday. They brought a corrected document to me today. But perhaps they made a mistake, or perhaps something is happening in government. I thought it was more than 8%, but we all make mistakes. But he says today it is 8%. What we do know, however, is that the loan that it is being used to extinguish, pardon my language, is at a lesser rate of interest. Where are the noises? This loan is taken at 8% according to today's resolution. To extinguish a loan that has a lower interest rate. Do the people of Barbados understand this? That it is nothing to boast about? That you have a loan at an existing interest rate that is less than the one that you are now borrowing to extinguish that first loan, I beg your pardon, ma'am. 8% is very expensive. And let the people of Barbados be told that 8% alone at the high interest rate of 8% reflects the high-risk status of Barbados' debt profile. That if we had a debt profile that was more favorable, the interest would have been lower. It also reflects that Barbados seems to be enduring difficulty in borrowing locally, although I did hear the Honourable Member. I didn't hear, sometimes his voice drops when he doesn't want me to hear. But I believe I caught him saying that they are about to or have borrowed $200 million on the local market. I think he said that. I think so. But at the rate this country is going, ma'am, the interest rates that will accompany our borrowing, or excessive borrowing, is likely to increase even beyond 8%. Can't we tell the truth in here, in peace and in quiet? Let the government defend what the government is doing. I did not interrupt the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central when he was sent here to do what he did today. Why are his colleagues interrupting me for the truth? I did not interrupt him when he said that this economy is experiencing growth, which I know it is not. Because I know that the growth is inflationary. The growth is a numbers game because the people of Barbados are not living it. They're not experiencing it. Their wages are not experiencing it. In a growing economy, ma'am, people live better. In a growing economy, ma'am, a government does not have to force employers to increase salaries. They don't. That is the consequence of an economy that is experiencing growth. And the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central is sent. He's sent to do what he does. but the people in this country are not living well. He made a very curious statement, though. The Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central made a very curious statement. Yes, I like to take notes. Not only do I study the resolutions, but I have an ear for the speech that is made. And after telling this House about the significant turnaround in the fortunes of the Barbadian economy, there was what we in the courts call a proviso, a caution, a warning. And this is what he said, and the Honourable Member said, and I quote, "I will not say to you that there won't be a time when we will have to increase taxes." Now, that is a warning to the people of this country. That is a very honest warning to the people of this country. That the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central sent here to do what he has done today is warning the people of this country about the very real prospect of increased taxation. So the Honourable Member for St. Peter is boasting that a minimum wage has been increased. And right next to him, 2 seats away from him, is the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central forewarning this country of the very real prospect of increased taxation. When? This year? Next year? When? But we take the warning. This is not an economy that is doing well. This economy is in peril. Like the society and its safety, also in peril. This society and this economy are both in peril, and they're connected one to the other. The eruption of violence is not unrelated to an economy that is limping along. Ill. I go back to the basic point. This government is borrowing $500 million US at an interest rate of 8% to repay the IMF, whose loan is at a lesser percentage. Let me hear the noise. I don't need a long speech for this. And I won't make a long speech for it. But the other curious statement that I recorded was when the Honourable Member boasted about this creature called the Bridgetown Initiative, related as it is to the climate initiative and so on. You don't criticize everything under the sun. But the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, he does make some interesting statements. He said, we want other countries to do this. And I wondered, why has the Barbadian government now found itself in an isolated place of high indebtedness, of frequent and excessive borrowing? And is the Barbados government in that isolated place seeking company? There was the fable of the fox who lost his tail. It got trapped, and he could not remove it from the trap. So he couldn't walk around with the trap. You know what he had to do? He had to cut off his tail. So the fox, you know, the tail of a fox is a very beautiful part of the fox's body. big, bushy, and beautiful. So that fox had to remove his tail to save himself. And you know what that fox did, ma'am? All the other foxes he saw, he kept telling them, look, y'all would be so beautiful without your tail. Why don't you cut off your tail too? He was in peril. He was alone. But he wanted the other foxes to look like him. He had lost his beauty, his tail. He was in a situation of isolation. And you know, if you know what is going on, Honourable Member for Christchurch West, look, I told y'all I am alone here, but I'm not lonely. I warned you. I am going to make a disclosure very soon, but not today. But it took an old fox to warn the others, look, that fox is a trickster. He lost his tail in circumstances of misfortune. Ignore him. Keep your tails. Now, it may be that the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central has encountered other foxes with their tails and feeling isolated in spite of the opinion of the Honourable Member for Christchurch West. Feeling isolated, the Honourable Member now seeks company in his misfortune, in the misfortune that is facing this country. Has this country found itself in a dilemma in which it now stands out as one of the few countries with high debt and not producing? Because high debt must be accompanied by production. You borrow for the purpose of increasing production, increasing your growth. This economy has not been experiencing growth. Perhaps people don't mind borrowing because borrowing is natural. Any financial or economic entity is best run and managed when it is borrowing. And you borrow for the purpose of not only survival, not only to survive, but you borrow to thrive. We Barbadians now wonder, if this country has found itself in a situation in which the borrowing has been accompanied by a lack of growth. And that is entirely possible. And it is reflected in the social breakdown out there. A lot of unemployment, a lot of underemployment. Low salaries. In fairness to the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, he was the first person I heard in here pleading a case. Not St. Peter. This gentleman here from Christchurch West, he was the first one I heard pleading a case about 3 or 4 years ago for an increase in the minimum wage. He was the first person. When others were too cowardly to do it, he was doing it. But I have not come to praise him. I want to bury this initiative here today as adding to Barbadian woe, as being an imposition, a burden on this economy, an additional burden on this economy. An economy that is struggling from all indications. An economy that is over-reliant on one tourism sector, while the other important sector of agriculture is close to its deathbed, as evidenced by a task force within the Ministry of Agriculture, which was set up a few days ago to revive food production in this country, food referring to milk and other dairy products. We used to dump milk in this country. We used to dump milk in this country a few years ago. Milk. And we used to have eggs in abundance. There's now a task force in the Ministry of Agriculture whose duty, under the dismal failure of the Honourable Member for St. Philip South, the dismal failure of the Honourable Member for St. Philip South has resulted in the establishment of a task force in the Ministry of Agriculture that seeks to ensure that this country will have food security at the very basic level of milk and eggs. Agriculture has gone down 3% of GDP, and the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central comes here today and says that this economy is growing. It is not. The only thing that is growing in this economy is crime and debt. That's the only growth that this economy is experiencing, and I say that in all seriousness. And we are in peril. We as a country, we are in peril. The time for the fancy stories has come to an end. Let this government demonstrate a competence in managing this economy. Let this government demonstrate a willingness to be candid with the people of this country and to say to the people of this country who are suffering that this economy is ill. It is ill. And that it needs some kind of injection. But to borrow money to repay a loan is not an injection into the economy. This country needs real investment. This country needs an increase in job and job opportunity. And the mass exodus of the young people of this country to Canada, North America, the Caribbean, and Europe is evidence that this economy, this country is failing the young people of this country with energies. The young people who should be working are dying in the street. These things are related, ma'am. And those who are working, the middle and the working class, are to be burdened upon the promise of the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central with heavier taxation in the not too distant future. I say in the foreseeable future. No joke. No joke. We are in crisis. This country is in crisis. This economy is in crisis. This society is in crisis. And the crisis now becomes exacerbated by the frequent borrowing, the loans that represent a burden on the weak shoulders of a country that is in resignation. And what must we do? That is not a question for the government. That is a question for the people of Barbados. What must we do? Your Honor, I am obliged to you.
Honourable Member. Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise with honor to speak in this debate, recognizing that this resolution is fundamentally about asking us to approve a transaction that allows the people and government of Barbados to play its best possible hand through the undertaking of liability management to ensure that we can create the space to be able to protect Barbadians over the course of the next few years in a global society and economy that is excessively turbulent and facing the most challenging of times since World War II and since we became an independent nation. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I rise conscious that this country has not gone to the international capital markets in this way since roughly 2010 or 2011, largely because the Democratic Labour Party administration, led by a prime minister who refused to take proper advice, ended up in a situation where it reduced this country to 23 credit downgrades successively, and where we could not borrow money from anybody of any significant capacity or integrity outside of Barbados, largely because of the manner in which the affairs of the country had been managed by them. It is therefore passing strange, at the very least, that the leader of the opposition, who found absolutely everything wrong with the management of the country by the Democratic Labour Party between 2008 and 2018, has all of a sudden had a political catharsis and comes in here now to cause the country of Barbados to believe that the country is in serious decline and that the people of Barbados ought to be considerably worried because the manner in which the country is being managed has not only shown no appreciable progress, but has led to the decline and decimation even of this country. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I listened to him even get worked up. You know, the most amazing thing is that before coming back in on the floor, I was doing some files, and I was watching him on the television in the closed monitor in my office. And do you know that for the majority of the speech, the honourable member kept his head down? Because he did not even have the confidence in his own delivery to look at you or most people in this chamber. And it is only when he started to get into the wild political allegations that he started to raise his back and stand as if he had something to say. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, let us start, because the first thing that the most junior member of Parliament learns is to take the documents given to you on the order paper and read them. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, if he had done so, he would begin first and foremost to see who were the joint book runners in this transaction. Now, he asked the question about White Oak. This transaction was run by J.P. Morgan Securities and Standard Chartered. And they were engaged as a result of a public tender to be able to engage in what he, through his ignorance, wants to associate with Barnum and Bailey Circus because he has no knowledge of financial markets. For if he had any knowledge of financial markets, he would know that the language of roadshow is associated with the presentations made to investors to allow investors to determine whether they want to buy your bonds or not. But not only did he never get to do one, he never took the time to find out what one is about. Because had he done so, he would also have been far more measured and capable of addressing the matters in here. Now let me start with the litany of misrepresentations placed before this honourable chamber. And I have no doubt that the honourable member for Christchurch East Central will also seek to give some level of tutoring. It doesn't matter whether he runs or not, the facts shall be here. The bottom line is that his first misrepresentation is that all of this money is going to prepay the IMF. Well, let me tell him what it is also going to do. Because the IMF prepayment before the money is due to be paid is actually the smaller part of what we are using this money for. We are choosing to prepare the 2029 Euro bonds, which largely is the debt that the Democratic Labour Party left in the country, and which were the result of the restructuring that took place in 2018, and that those bonds will come to be due no later than 2029. And we have started to pay principal now. But if the government of Barbados, through liability management, can so prepay them such that we do not have to pay principal for the next 5 years, because if he had read the order paper would have shown him that the terms and conditions of access, that the principal amount of the notes will be payable in semi-annual installments during the last 5 years of the notes, commencing on the 26th of December 2030 and ending on the 26th of June 2035. Now that may be a little too high for him. But what that really means, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that we will no longer be paying principal on our debt, and that principal on this debt which we are incurring today will only start to be paid in 2030. So that you immediately remove, for the balance of this fiscal year, I believe the sum is in excess of $120 million from having to be repaid in this fiscal year. And next year, it goes to over $200 million. So that by nothing else other than being innovative, and by going to be able to pursue a level of liability management, we create the fiscal space that allows us to meet the needs of Bajans across the board without having to increase taxes so to do. And because the Honourable Member, as honest a man as he is in Christchurch East Central, says the obvious thing that any Minister of Finance would say in good times and more so in bad times, that you can never guarantee that taxes will never have to be raised. But this government reduced income taxes on people in Barbados in 2019, went through a whole pandemic for 3 years, faced another $1 billion structural adjustment, and since then, we have not increased income taxes. We increased the reverse tax credit for people earning under $25,000. We also ensured that we gave people earning between $18,000 and $25,000 a reverse tax credit, increasing the numbers benefiting from that by thousands of people. And Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, ensuring that how many tax-free budgets have we brought straight in a row? How many tax-free budgets have we brought straight in a row? Now, the problem with the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, 5 tax-free budgets straight in a row. The problem for the Honourable Member in Christchurch South is that he is so out of his depth on this issue that not only could he not raise his head to address the Honourable Chamber, but he continued to mislead from pillar to post. Madam Deputy Speaker, he indicated that there could not be a significant turnaround in the fortunes of Barbados. Well, let me tell you this. When the Democratic Labour Party was in office, what did the credit rating agencies do for Barbados? Downgrade after downgrade after downgrade after downgrade. Ironically, Madam Deputy Speaker, Fitch came out with a rating on our bonds today. And I come into that too. And B+ was the rating. Consistent with the long-term foreign currency rating of the country. But I go further, Madam Deputy Speaker. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. The Honourable Member could not even get straight. He said that the member for Christchurch East Central said that the people offer us $2 billion. What happened, and what the member said, is that the bids for Barbados's bonds, where we said we only want $500 million, that $2.8 billion in bids came in. In other words, 5.6 times what we needed. And Madam Deputy Speaker, what is the significance of that? Nobody comes to offer to buy what you are selling if they do not believe that what you are selling is worthwhile and of value. And that is the point that the Honourable Member is missing. And that he continues to believe that because he has some acting skills, that he can tell Barbadians over and over and over and over that they are suffering, that they are this, that they are that. And Madam Deputy Speaker, there may be pockets of people in any society that will have challenges. But Madam Deputy Speaker, he is so in love with his voice. Can you ever, and he's so in love with himself that anytime he sits down, the first thing he does is to go into his phone and start looking for comments from the handful of people who write him and start to smile as if he is experiencing the most pleasurable moment in life. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me tell you about him. The reality is, and focus on him, that his message about sufferation after sufferation in St. James North, from Ashton Hall in St. Peter, right back down to Mount Stanford, from out by Highway 2A on the weekend when they stood there telling all kinds of things, right back down to the coast again. He was not even able to ensure that his candidate could keep their deposit and sent back the deposit to the Treasury. But Madam Deputy Speaker, his message is resonating so much. His message is resonating so much. And I want to tell you that the reality is that he's not even learning from his mistakes. If he would take the time to be tutored, let us look, not by me, by those who are finance and economics gurus and specialists. Madam Deputy Speaker, let's look at the facts. Let's look at the facts. The bottom line is, rattled? Let me tell you, I would love to be rattled. Barbados went to the bond markets yesterday. Other countries whose credit rating is higher than Barbados. Our ratings are B or B2 or B+, depending on which agency. There are other countries with B+ and B1 and BB-, higher credit ratings. And the higher credit rating ought to mean lower interest rates. Those countries, he quarreled about our 8%. Those countries are paying 8.25%. And before we went to the market, the increase in interest rates that the whole world has seen, you only got to turn on the television and see that interest rates have increased across the world. But the Honourable Member is speaking as if the world in which he is living is the world of low interest rates that the Democratic Labour Party presided over from 2008 after the last major financial crisis, when a conscious decision was taken to start to lower interest rates across the world. But Bajans are smarter than that, because Bajans understand the world in which we live and they understand from the pandemic to the wars in Africa, to the wars in Europe, to the wars now in the Middle East, that they have all had a cumulative impact on the world. And the bottom line is that not only is our interest rate lower than countries whose credit rating is higher than ours, but let me go further, Madam Deputy Speaker. We have included for the first time at this scale of issuance natural disaster clauses and pandemic clauses. And Madam Deputy Speaker, he is going to continue to poo-poo them and deprecate them until the day that they have to be prayed into action by a future government of Barbados. And what will they do for us? That they will allow us to suspend the payment of interest and principal for 2 years, such that if something happened to us that is of a certain threshold according to the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility that we use as the trigger, that we will be in a position to use that money to rebuild Barbados. And similarly, if there is a pandemic again, certified by the WHO, the World Health Organization, and in which we have to spend more than 20%, I believe, of our expenditure, we can equally seek to suspend our debt repayments. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is so out of his depth that he does not even take the time. You know, the document is only less than 6 pages to read the Bridgetown Initiative. Because if he had read it, he wouldn't say, what it is? That kind of, he called it a creature. How does the Bridgetown Initiative become a creature called by the Leader of the Opposition, who should at least acquaint himself with the affairs of this nation? For if he had, he would know that the Bridgetown Initiative is not about climate, but it is fundamentally about the reform of the financial system so that small countries like Barbados can have a fairer deal to succeed in this world. And unlike him, the Bridgetown Initiative takes context, because he takes no context. I told you earlier today that he is living in the 1960s and 70s, but I suppose if you are approaching the age of 70, you have a hearkening back to your younger days. I do. I do too. I'm approaching the age of 60, and I have come to understand that there are things upon which I must take advice, rather than to believe that Barbados must remain frozen in its time past, such that we will not be able to meet the needs of today or to build the Barbados of tomorrow by living in that age of the 1960s and 70s. And Madam Deputy Speaker, it gets worse. You know, this is a man that says he wants to be heard in silence. I don't ask to be heard in silence, but I want him to know that if you want something, you must understand that you must also live it and walk it and not just preach it. Because he is so shaken that he has not been able to do that which he asked all other members of the House in here to do for him. Now, the difference is that I asked for no quarter and I give none. So let us be very clear about that. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I go further. His failure to understand the Bridgetown Initiative at the very time when the world more than ever, we are coming up to the major Financing for Development conference in Spain next week. And that simple thing, just like the Bridgetown Initiative has advocated with natural disaster clauses, will make the difference between a country that can survive and a country that falls. Let me give you context again. When Dominica was hit by Hurricane Maria, the first major payments that Dominica had to make was not to be able to spend money on Dominicans to shelter them or to give them food. They had to go and find money to pay debt to the international institutions. Now, how in God's name can you look at people suffering? Can you look at people without shelter? Can you look at people without any capacity to take care of themselves and tell me that our first duty must be to pay somebody debt who could equally wait. And the natural disaster clauses that the Bridgetown Initiative espouses does that. But the leader of the opposition's voice is so loud and booming in here that and repetitive in his woe of misery, tale of misery and woe, that he would want us to ignore the fact that the United Kingdom Export Credit Agency has followed Barbados with the natural disaster clauses and called them climate-resistant, climate-resilient clauses. That the World Bank has followed and introduced natural disaster clauses for all small island states of the world, which includes virtually 1/4 of the world's countries. But no, just like the debt swap, he redefines in ignorance what his understanding is, and then constructs a speech on the platform of ignorance as if we are then to be able to say, oh no, you are so right, because you have now told us that this thing is what it should be. Ignore the credit rating agencies, all of whom have upgraded Barbados, all four, because that includes Carrie Chris. Ignore the World Bank. Ignore the International Monetary Fund. Ignore the Latin American Development Bank and Caribbean Development Bank, CAF. Ignore the Caribbean Development Bank. And above all now that the markets have spoken, ignore the markets. And then, Madam Deputy Speaker, his ignorance on these matters extends even, he says he likes to write. But clearly, when he writes, he does not write what he's heard appropriately or accurately. He spoke about the fact that the member for Christchurch East Central described Barbados as what? A mango ready to be plucked. Now, he knows that if he was in a court of law, the judge would have pulled him up for that, because he has deliberately or otherwise misquoted the member for Christchurch East Central. The member for Christchurch East Central said that the comments that he made about juicy and being plucked related to the primary surplus, not to the country Barbados. But so disingenuous has he been in this speech that he now transplants it and puts it and attaches it to the country Barbados, forgetting that when the records are called or the videos are played over, that the member for Christchurch East Central was referring to the primary surplus. And let me put it in context again, as the member did. Because we have adhered to a certain level of discipline, given the reckless behavior of the Democratic Labour Party, we have been able to take this country out of the doldrums where nobody wanted to do business with us. And even if they did, we had to pay the highest interest rate. He is worrying about 8% when they left a Credit Suisse loan of over 13%. Madam Deputy Speaker, what madness am I hearing in here today? And that was in a low interest rate environment, when we are now living in a high interest rate environment. But that is typical of the member for Christchurch South. You know, it is a dangerous thing when you do not know, or you suspect that you don't care that you do not know. And when you don't know that you don't know, that is the most dangerous condition. And to come in here, can you imagine if he was in charge of the affairs of Barbados? When not even a Monopoly game could take his leadership. Not even a Monopoly game could take his leadership. Well, all the money would disappear overnight. And the bottom line is that let him tell you that in his life, he has never used debt to be able to build. Let him tell you whether he has built his house out of cash. I know most of us in here cannot do that. Let him tell you that, like most Barbadians, he has not had to go to the bank at some point and say, let me borrow a loan and refinance and repay this loan that I got here, that if I stretch it out, my cash flow can be lower. Because that is all this government is doing. Making the government's obligations lower such that we can do more for the people of this country and be in a position to protect them. Because should this war in the Middle East escalate, should the Straits of Hormuz remain closed, you can bet your bottom dollar that we are going to face circumstances globally that will be virtually unparalleled since becoming an independent nation, and indeed since World War II. Madam Deputy Speaker, he must be the only political leader any part of the world. No, he's a political leader of Democratic Labour Party. He is the only political leader any part of the world that can believe that the circumstances which we face globally now are not of the gravest, gravest, gravest concern. I don't mind whether he walks out as usual, Madam Deputy Speaker. The honourable member showed his hand when he spoke in the budget debate, and when he spent the first hour complaining about the licks that he got in the previous budget debate. He is as thin-skinned as he is devoid of knowledge on financial matters.
Honourable member, please, if you're leaving, please be quiet.
Madam Deputy Speaker, if he feels that we are getting into his personal business, tell him we are start. Because if he does not believe that he can be used as an example to be able to show Barbados that every citizen has at some time or another, unless born as part of the landed gentry, has had to engage in borrowing and the incurring of debt in order to be able to build development. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I just want to say that can you imagine if this was who was in charge of the affairs of this country? And I want to thank the honourable member for Christchurch East Central for laying out with clarity where the government of Barbados finds itself, why we are undertaking liability management to prepay the 2029 Eurobonds, why we are equally prepaying a portion of the IMF debt, so as to give ourselves additional breathing space, fiscal space, cash flow, call it what you want to call it for the sake of the ordinary man. Because we will not have to start repaying principal until 2030, the 26th of December 2030 again. And what it allows us to do is to so efficiently manage our affairs, especially given the global turbulence that we are facing. I want to say and to share with you, you heard the member for Christchurch East Central say it. We had committed to go to tender for the roadshow, a deal roadshow, because our face-to-face visits was for a non-deal roadshow. But we committed to go to tender for a deal roadshow, and within less than 24 hours, Israel bombed Iran. And anybody who knows anything about the international capital markets will know that global instability causes the markets to react. Prime Minister Liz Truss in England understood that when they delivered a budget that so offended and upset the markets that it effectively led to the implosion of her government within a matter of weeks. President Trump understood that when the announcement of his tariffs led the markets to go crazy a few months ago, and he had to readjust scheduling of timelines and discussions and all kinds of things to placate the market. But it wasn't only that first day when we decided to go to issue the tender. Once we determined that we were actually going to execute the transaction, on Monday, June the 23rd. What happened on June 22nd? The United States bombed nuclear sites in Iran. And on Sunday, there was actually consideration as to whether we would proceed or not. But we were confident that the Barbados story, one that has seen debt moving, all this talk about debt. Debt has gone in Barbados to 102.4% as we speak, and is scheduled to be less than 3 figures, to be 2 figures by the end of the year. But let me compare it, because the honourable member gets on as if Barbados' debt is high and dangerous and thing. It is high, but it is not as high as many countries. The United States of America, according to Trade and Economics at December 2024, the US's debt to GDP ratio, 124%. France, 113%. Canada, 111%. Spain, that is hosting the Financing for Development Conference next week, 108%. Singapore, the country that almost all of us admire, the one that Errol Barrow, Right Excellent Errol Barrow, spoke of so highly, and that all across the world we know Singapore to be a beacon like a city on a hill. Singapore, 173%. And we have worked to bring ours down and are at 102.4% and will go to somewhere between 98 and 99% by the end of the year. But the member for Christchurch South will continue to echo a refrain that Barbados is in dangerous waters and Barbados is about to fall off the cliff, and that we what? The country is in resignation and in peril? What foolishness is this? Let me encapsulate it for you. A small island developing state called Barbados goes to the international capital markets for the first time in about 14 years. Goes with a credit rating lower than many. In the middle of a war that is escalating in the Middle East, that is threatening to bring us closer and closer to global instability at best, and to global warfare at worst. We go to the market with a natural disaster clause and a pandemic clause that the market has never used before. You understand what I just tell you? That bonds are issued by companies and countries every day. And the market globally is not accustomed to natural disaster clauses, and certainly not pandemic clauses. And not only do we go to the market, but we have 5.6 times what we are asking for, bidding for what we are offering. When we asked the others what is the definition of excellence, they said bids that are 3 times what you're asking for. And that what Barbados did was exceptional. But it is not this government, it is the country. And it is a sacrifice made by all Bajans over the last 7 years that have allowed us to be here. And I want to make that point. And I want to thank Barbadians, because without their participation and goodwill, and that is why we would not be here. And that is why we said from the beginning, 2 weeks after being elected, when the leader of the opposition was sitting on the back bench, and he was clapping and very happy to say so, share the burden, share the bounty. And this government has not only talked the talk, but it has walked the walk. And contrary to all that they have said, when we return the $300 to each person over 18 who wants to get it, then it was reduced to being some form of welfarism and some kind of negative act. Well, I am sure that his candidate in St. James North was happy for it, because having received a $300 contribution, when the deposit was lost in the treasury, she still had $50 in her hand. He asked about White Oak's fee, but I suppose that he could not face the truth and left before, because I promised him that I would address it. And he was, as usual, trying to cast innuendo and to indicate that we are paying out millions of dollars to White Oak or some exorbitant fee, and that we are frightened to tell the country what the situation is. Madam Deputy Speaker, what madness is this? I want to tell you in this Parliament, White Oak has had not a single dollar coming from this specific transaction that is before the Parliament of Barbados today. White Oak has been our advisors since 2018, and they provide general advice to the government of Barbados. And therefore, JP Morgan Securities has to be paid. Standard Chartered has to be paid out of this transaction, but not White Oak. But when the member is searching, if you cannot debate me on competence, if you cannot come toe-to-toe with me on competence, then where do you descend to be able to fight? Stop playing in matters that are way beyond your competence. You would have done better, you would have done better, Madam Deputy Speaker, to be able to say, I don't support it, I can't. But by the way in which he spoke, he left all to see that he could not appreciate what this debate is fundamentally about. I go back to make the point that on Friday, 84% of the people holding our 2029 Eurobonds agreed to be repaid, which will mean that $340 million of this 500 will go straight to be able to pay, repay, and prepay, I should say, those Eurobonds 2029. Of note, some of the people who are taking the prepayments have actually bid for the new bonds and are agreed to walk with us for the long haul again, rather than jump off ship. Because if you thought that Barbados was a bad risk, a poor risk, you would be jumping off the ship when you get prepaid, rather than trying to come back in and participate in the new bonds that we are offering. It is amazing. In addition, other countries have prepaid the IMF as we are doing. St. Kitts did it. Other countries have done it. And what it does is that it sends a signal to the markets and to the credit rating agencies. And why is that important? If we can, through our credit ratings, continue to reduce the cost of money to the government of Barbados, and by extension, to Barbadian companies, and by extension, to Barbadian individual households, as you heard the member for Christchurch East Central speak, we can reduce the interest rates for everybody who is borrowing from government to company to household. And that is what we are doing, because the Democratic Labour Party government saw us have our cost of borrowing not only rise significantly, but their actions led to companies like Sagicor re-domiciling from Barbados because they could not get a higher credit rating than the sovereign credit rating of the country. And a company that was established in this country in the middle of the 19th century, built by Bajans initially, could not withstand the weight of the incompetence of the Democratic Labour Party administration led by the former Prime Minister. Madam Deputy Speaker, what am I really hearing? I said earlier today that Sir John Stanley Bruce Dare, otherwise known as Jack Dare, told me you argue a case once in court. And I simply say to the people of Barbados that the judgment has been passed not by the people who sit on this bench, not by the members of the Barbados Labour Party, but by all independent actors, many of whom, as Bajans would say, don't rise at none of us, and therefore don't owe us anything. And when you have the independent players outside passing judgment, not just to speak, but to put their money where their mouth is, to express confidence, to give us almost 6 times in bids what we were looking for, and to drive down the price. And then on the day after the bonds are issued, today, to be trading above par, such that the effective yield is between 7.93 and 7.95% now, even below the 8%. I don't know what more we can do to advise, help the Democratic Labour Party, but I do know what we can do to protect the people of Barbados from the Democratic Labour Party. And that is to keep them far, far from the management of the financial and economic affairs of this nation. I ask this honourable chamber to remember, I know what it is to be a member of this parliament when the order paper came down late with the Credit Suisse loan. And when, I think it started at 9%, at an even higher rate than these bonds are at a time of low interest rates. And I know what it is to have seen us not be able to get help from anywhere. And I say to this honourable chamber, this government may not be perfect, and it makes no assertion to be. If you know me, you know that is not my style. But what we have done is to come to work and work with Bajans from the labour movement, the private sector, households, and across the board to help restructure under the Barbados Economic Restructuring and Transformation Program 1 and 2, and to put us in a position where we have regained the confidence of the international and regional communities in the management of our fiscal and economic affairs. We have reduced unemployment to 6.3%. But as I have said recently, the fact that we are now at the lowest ever unemployment rate in the history of this country will not stop us from doing all that we can to address underemployment and to go even further below the 6.3%. We have been able to moderate inflation in the last year to 1.4%, a situation that will help us start from a good position if there is a further increase in prices globally as a result of the Middle East conflict. We have been able to see real economic growth. And in the Caribbean community last year, there were only 2 countries who had more than 4% growth, and Barbados was one of them. And I go further. The truth of the pudding is always in the proof of the pudding is always in the eating. This government remains committed to bringing our debt to GDP ratio down to 60% by 2035-36, barring no major disasters globally. And what is significant is that we have been faithful in that. And who have we chosen in most instances to prepay and repay debt to first? The Bajans, to the pensioners, to the people who had to take bonds of one type or another. And while there's still some bonds there, we have prepaid debt every year in the last 2 years. And we are committed to putting more money in the hands of Bajans, which is why we have seen savings rise and domestic excess liquidity in this country rise. In simple terms, we have put more money in people's pockets. But listening to the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, you would not believe that there have been 3 salary increases in the last 7 years. You would not believe that the minimum wage has been set and gone up since then. And that while things may not be how things were at some point in the past, it is not because of the management of our economy. It is because the world in which we live now is facing polycrises. In other words, crisis after crisis after crisis after crisis. And I know, because as Prime Minister, every time I think we're ready to turn the corner and move fast, something happens globally. We did the debt restructuring. Within 2 months, bam, COVID came. We get out of COVID after 3 years, bam, the Russia-Ukraine war came, and immediately oil prices and supply chains disrupted. Food prices up, inflation up. We get into the point where we moderate inflation, we got unemployment right down, and bam, Middle East gone mad, and Israel and the USA seeking to bomb Iran, and Iran bombing back. Airspace shut down in the UAE. And let me say for the record, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been in deep contact on a regular basis the last 2 days with the citizens of Barbados who are in the UAE through our embassy there. And we've asked them also to have oversight for those who may be in Qatar or in Saudi Arabia, because we are conscious that the Hajj would have just taken place and some people may still be there in the Gulf states and may not yet have returned to Barbados. So that this is not normal circumstances. We have a minister out there, the Honourable Member for St. Michael North, and we have been working assiduously to see how we can get back in, because British Airways pulled their flights from since Sunday. But you would have a member for Christchurch South come in here and pretend that this is debating class in first form at Harrison College. I can't even say sixth form, because the extent to which he has reduced himself does not demand our respect for someone who has yet understood that context matters in debating. I want to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I give the assurance to Barbadians, that in this act, we have created fiscal space that will allow us to do more roads, that will allow us to support the hospital in a meaningful way, that will allow us to be able to clean up the country such that when we start to go into our 60th anniversary as a nation from the 1st of December, that we do so as a clean nation, to allow us to be able to put in place any further requirements that the police may need and the other law enforcement agencies may need as we face these difficult times where people are trying to challenge the stability of this nation and the security of our people. And if you doubted that it took cash to here, go back to the Democratic Labour Party of 2013. They removed flexible payments, flexi-time payments for the police and others from 2013. It took this government to reintroduce them properly. They removed free education because they had not the money to pay for it, and meant that people who would otherwise benefit from free tertiary education would not be in a position to do so. And I can go on and on with the litany of woes. No buses bought for 10 years. No sanitation trucks bought for 10 years. This government has taken a whole host of delivery of trucks, and another set are due to come next month in July that will put us in a position to start to move towards 2 collections a week. How do you think that happens? By twiddling your nose? By getting up in here and making statements that don't have no relationship with the truth? It happens, Madam Deputy Speaker, because we roll up our sleeves and think outside the box and try to work out how best to stretch the dollar. And you as a mother, you as a teacher would know, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the first duty of a mother is to be able to see how I can make what a little I got stretch to be able to feed and take care and clothe everybody. And she would be the first to go to the credit union and be able to say, I owe X here, I pay now $500 here in a payment that due in 3 years' time. I pay now $200 in another payment that due in 5 years' time, because all of a sudden now I'm paying both principal and interest. Can I borrow a little something more to get through these times from you? And instead of me having to pay out $700 a month, I can be paying out $400 a month going forward, even if in total you may be paying out for a longer period of time, but it allows you to manage and to get through from day to day and month to month and year to year, and to provide in essential ways what you need to keep that family together and to move it from strength to strength. We have done no different as a government. I want to salute the team, and I want for the record to read the team into the Hansard. The Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central accompanied me. The Director of Finance and Economic Affairs, Mr. Ian Carrington. The Governor of the Central Bank. The Chairman of the Growth Council, Mr. Doddridge Miller. Senior Economic Advisor, Dr. Arnold McIntyre. The advisor on tax, and particularly the global minimum tax, and therefore our stability in terms of our fiscal flows, Mr. Pascal Santama. White Oak, through David Nagoski and Sebastian Espinosa. And of course, the teams that supported us at Capitol. The Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance is Nancy Headley, Mrs. Nancy Headley, and the head of the debt unit, Ms. Antonina Innes. And from Central Bank, what's Michelle's last name? Michelle Yearwood, who has done an outstanding job for us in helping us to manage the joint economic group on a monthly basis. You know why I am so emotional today, Madam Deputy Speaker? Because all of those names I told you, if you think that that was the only duty they have in Barbados, you lie. Every member in this Parliament would know that they are always calling the Director of Finance and Economic Affairs and the PS Finance. Half of them would tell you that they have to be calling the Chairman of the Growth Council for those who work in the productive sectors, or the Senior Economic Advisor. All of these people are carrying multiple duties. But if we were in a developed country or a larger developing country, do you know that the only thing they would be doing is this and this alone with respect to the management of debt and the management of the fiscal affairs of the country? So we owe them a huge debt of gratitude. And as you heard from the Minister, this was not no joyride. To move from Boston to New York, to London and Paris, all in 4 days, takes a toll on the human body. 2 days on planes, 2 days on trains. And I therefore want to thank everyone, and I want to say to this Honourable Chamber, the reason why this is important is that for 14 years, this country did not have the confidence of the people of the world to be able to go back to the markets, either to borrow, for liability management, for financing purposes, for any purposes on the international capital markets. And not only did we do so in the middle of a war and conflict, but we have done so securing a better interest rate than countries who have a better credit rating than Barbados. I am proud to lead Barbados at this time. And I am happy to support this resolution. And I thank all honourable members for their support as we go forward. I'm obliged to you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Honourable Member for Christchurch. Question.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I promise not to be long. I see all the honourable members looking at me. I guess they thought that the debate would come to an end. But I just want to add a few words to this historic debate. The first thing, of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, is I have to get up and support this. This is truly, truly a historic day today, because not only did we do something in terms of taking a report for a resolution for parliamentary reform in the first part, but then today to come and bring a bill for a historic debt, a historic bond issue, which has seen a tremendous vote of confidence in the people of Barbados, can only be seen as a historic day today. It is unfortunate, though, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the Honourable Member for Christchurch South is not in his seat. And I say that for two reasons. The first thing is he picked an unfortunate concept of a fox losing its tail. But how many Barbadians have actually seen a fox? We are more accustomed to seeing monkeys. And we understand that the higher a monkey climbs, the greater he shows his tail. And you know, Madam Deputy Speaker, if you could sign up somebody other than yourself for financial literacy courses, we would have to sign up the member for Christchurch South today. Because he absolutely showed he does not understand financial matters at all, at all, at all. At no time in his discourse did he show any proficiency in understanding what this particular matter was doing. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to be very, very clear. There is no member of the Democratic Labour Party that can lecture the people of the Barbados Labour Party about debt. None. None of them at all. And I say why. When they came to this honourable chamber, they came to print money. We have not come here to print money. We have come here to give fiscal space for the people of Barbados. And you could not say it better than the Honourable Prime Minister. What it is it gives you, even although it gives you a longer term to repay, the quantum that you prepay, the quantum that you amortize is less. So it means that your cash flow is better. Anybody who understands wealth, understands debt, can be used to your advantage as long as you manage it well. And that's exactly what this is doing today. It is using debt to your advantage and using it in a way that you can manage it, and manage it in a way that you get more cash flow. And what does that cash flow mean? That means that you have better chances to spend that difference, that delta, between what you were having to pay in debt repayment before and what you're paying in debt repayment after, by extending the term, even although the interest rate increases. You know, it is something that people who understand numbers understand this. It is simple. It's simple. You can see it. It's like how you see the numbers, like how somebody sees day and night. It is obvious, because when you come to refinance, you refinance at a better term, and that's exactly what we're doing here today. But you know, I wanted to say to the Honourable Member, because he made it very clear, that we are borrowing money to repay a loan. But if you borrow money to repay a loan, you're not increasing. If your loan is X, and then you borrow X to pay back X, then there's no increase. It's not X plus Y. X remains the same. So that means then the Honourable Member does not understand the concept, does not understand the extension of loan, does not understand amortization, does not understand how to finance, and instead only comes with lies and innuendo. The only thing, it was interesting because the Honourable Member says that the only thing growing in Barbados was crime, he said, and prices and cost of living. Drug and crime. Well, the only thing growing is the number of people leaving the Democratic Labour Party under his leadership. He forgot that. And let me say, Madam Deputy Speaker, I was at a concrete pour on the weekend. And I was able to have a discussion with the leaders of Ready Mix who were providing the concrete. And they made it pellucidly clear to me that the quantum of concrete that they are selling per month is 3 times what they did under the previous administration. 3 times what they did. And he said in some months under the previous administration, it was even more because there was even less concrete because there was no growth. I can put it another way. Economists look and tell you, you can measure the growth of a country by the number of cranes. There are cranes all across this country. There's cranes in Bay Street. There's cranes in the north by Nikki Beach. There's cranes by Royalton. There's cranes by Hyatt. There was a crane by Indigo. And those cranes are there because the country is growing. The country continues to grow and grow at a rapid pace. You know, the biggest problem that we are facing now, Madam Deputy Speaker, is not whether we can keep the pace, but can we get enough steel into the country to meet the needs that we have for the growth and construction that we're having? And those are the kinds of problems that we have. Good problem to have. Can we get enough sand? Can we get enough grit to meet the needs for the concrete so that we can continue to grow this country? You know, this obviously, Madam Deputy Speaker, is a sign of confidence. Confidence not only in our Prime Minister, and I want to commend the Prime Minister and her team, the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, and all those who were involved in being able to getting this as a benefit for the people of Barbados. And this is definitely a benefit. But this shows confidence. And let me say, Madam Deputy Speaker, people don't go and pick up 10, 20, 30, or $40 million just so. They do their research. They research the government. They research the leader. They research the performance of the government and of the economy. And the reason that they would have put that confidence in us, because they look and they see that we are on the correct trajectory. We are on the right path to make things better for Barbados. And making things better for Barbados is for all Barbadians. And we will continue every single day to improve Barbados and to make things better, because that is why we have come to office. We have not come to office to print money. We have not come to office to watch Barbados go under. We have not come to office to see downgrade after downgrade. We came to save the Barbados dollar. We came to save Barbados from the dastard Democratic Labour Party. And it's unfortunate that the Democratic Labour Party now finds itself in the position that it is in. It is unfortunate that the Democratic Labour Party took us down the rabbit hole. And we came to a time in this country where we needed bold and courageous leadership. We found that leader in the Honourable Prime Minister. We came to a time in Barbados where we've had somebody who was prepared to make the tough decisions, who was prepared to save Barbados, who was prepared to say to the international world, we know what we have to do, and give us a chance to do it. And we have done it. And we have done it through the support of not only those that help us, not only those that advise us, but also those that have shown that confidence in us. And we will continue to do it every day, because this is a labor of love. This is not a labor just to say who wants office or who wants power. That's not why we do it. We do it because it's a labor of love for the people of Barbados. And by extension, always forever, the Barbados Labour Party. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable member.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I want to commend the contribution from the Honourable Prime Minister and that of the Honourable Member for Christchurch West. I think we've had an extremely good debate on this particular resolution. There's really not much left for me to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, but just to give the country the assurance that the government we've shown up for duty, we will continue to do so, and therefore, with those very few words, Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
Honourable members? The question is that this resolution do not pass. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This resolution now stands passed.
Madam Deputy Chair, Madam Deputy Speaker, with that we've come to the end of our business for today, and I therefore beg to move that Parliament do now be adjourned until Tuesday, 1st of July at 10 a.m.
The question is that this honourable chamber now stands suspended adjourned, excuse me, until Tuesday, the 1st of July, 2025 at 10 in the morning. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This honourable chamber now stands adjourned.